All right,
Hey,
we
Ted,
are.
what's up, buddy?
I would say we're live, but we're not live. We're recording this. It's all just a matter of speak.
Good.
All right, so we talked a little earlier. We wanted to cover a couple bullets of some things that we wanted to speak of. So first things first, let's talk about. Let's lay the background a little bit. So spending time on LinkedIn.
Mm.
You connect with individuals, you get to follow backgrounds, you get to see what people are doing or not doing. You get to hear about training concepts, you get to hear about problems in the industry. And of course, with us being deeply tied to law enforcement and protection, we get to see the whole gamut of it. So let's talk about why are we having social media influencers dominating the space in close protection or an executive protection field?
Oh, that's such a great question because it's so hard to define with the influencer mentality moving to LinkedIn
Yeah.
instead of staying on TikTok or whatever
Well,
media they have in the past.
I feel like we
Uh,
are on TikTok and on LinkedIn.
yeah, it's definitely changed over the years.
Yeah.
People trying to become influencers, taking pictures of themselves, thinking about subjects or talking about items and let's just bring it out. We came across you came across a particular individual that is I guess would be considered an influencer in the space of protection
Yeah.
and writing articles in protection magazines. And when you delve into the background, um, the 5 minutes of their background experience doesn't lend itself to the protection industry. So we talked a little bit earlier about trying to figure out how does that even happen? Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
And why do they have a voice in the industry when they actually haven't done the job?
Yeah. And I think it's all those are definitely the foundation of how we went down this road. I think it's worth talking about though, like why we are where we are now as far as our mindset and trying to go back over the last year or so or last 2 years of hey, what's going on in the states? You know what I mean? We've talked about this many times, whether it's been through the law enforcement lens or whether it's been through the protection lens. The last 24 months, the landscape has drastically changed on what threats look like.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and, and and that's basically where our issue is that if in fact we are talking about legitimate threats, um, and that's why we've been deep diving. We've been deep diving saying, hey, look, this is a networking platform. Let's go on here and let's see what type of issues, individuals are accounting out there, encountering professionals in the field, so on and so forth. And this just been mind blowing looking at, thinking you're looking at TikTok. You got people writing articles and putting out posts just for the sake of saying, hey, look at me.
Right.
And it holds no value whatsoever. And
Excuse me.
bless you. And to your last point, or before I actually jumped in, was
Yes, sir.
if you're imparting wisdom on me through a networking platform of professionals, and you have a particular opinion about something, or you're trying to direct me, or I'll say influence, you're trying to influence my decisions in this field, I want to know who you are. Who am I listening to? And I
And
want
why?
to know, it kind of goes back to, hey, why this matters. So I want to know, who am I listening to? Why should I listen to you? Anytime we talk about instruction, we always want to impart that wisdom to our students, which is, hey, let me go over and tell you why you should listen to the information we're putting out. It's the
Absolutely.
same standard. I want to know who I am listening to, or who am I reading? What article am I reading? Where are you basing this knowledge from?
Right.
And like you said, going back and saying, you're telling me a lot about protection, about systems, and about what's effective, so on and so forth, and about working against real threats. Well, then I want to know. what, again, not to beat the
Where you're
dead horse,
basing this
but
off of.
yeah,
Yeah.
where does this come from? I want to know what is helping to form your opinion on this before I actually take it seriously or not. And more, dude, it is hard to find individuals on there that know what the hell they're talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a smoke and mirrors at some of these backgrounds, we'll call it that, the experience levels, talking about 7 months here, 5 months here with this company. And then then you look up the company and it's a two-man freaking company, or it's out of the garage, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not saying that there's not some legitimate stuff in some of those places. I'm just saying that routinely, right, what we see are a roundabout um, bios, if you will, without actually discussing the particulars,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
you believe what you believe. And I always go back, and I'm not trying to beat up the CrossFit industry. I'm just saying I go back to the
Here you are.
mentality of in 8 hours, I'm going to make you a coach, you
Yeah.
know, mentality, instead of actually having a tiered system of learning through actual experiences.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Now, and in all fairness, if you are working in a corporate setting and you have spent hundreds of hours over the last year, on travel security, all the ins and
Right.
outs of flying private and dealing with private airports and traveling around. And you're going to write an article and you're going to talk about your experiences. Hey, in a day in the life of, or these are some of the hacks that I found out that are very helpful. And so, hey, by all means, man, put that out there, because at that point, if you're racking in those hours, then you legitimately have information to share and knowledge to put out there to do
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
If you're coming in and you want to tell me, during a direct threat situation, you're trying to sell me on how covert protection is going to protect the principal in a real world
Mm,
application against a real threat, I, I can't listen to you, man. You know
yeah.
what I mean? And all I got to do is look at your background and I can tell why you think that's effective,
Right.
because you never had to defend anybody against a real threat.
Right.
And
No,
that's
nothing
another
legitimate.
that's
Yeah.
another that's another tangent there. Um, so and we can go down this whole thing and call it. I had a bunch of things pulled off to the side here on some of the individuals that we're speaking of, and some of the nonsense is being put out there. And it's probably best we just don't go down that road. We'll just leave it.
Okay.
Maybe we'll save it for a later date.
All right.
As far as exploring that, and of course, well, we could just talk about it offline a little bit and figure out what we want to narrow down to talk about. As far as the detriment side of all of this influencing,
Right.
where people are just trying to get clicks and followers, and the hey, look at me status. It just does such a serious disservice to the industry, right? Anything
Yeah.
else you want to
And
say on that? Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no,
I,
no. I was
I
wrapping it up.
I think that it builds a false sense of capabilities to people also, not just in the industry, but possibly the clientele that are looking for information on how to pick a properly vetted team, if you will,
Oh
or
yeah.
personnel. So it does that disservice also. So it's very cyclic in nature in that. So, and I say that, and I know you want to get off the subject. We got other things that are more important, but my point is just this. Sometimes, when people start hiring from what they've seen because they don't know any better, and then those guys get their foot in the door, what do people like to do? They collect people that are like-minded,
Yep.
right? So then now they've opened the floodgate to other people that don't have experience either, right? And it's cyclic. It just keeps happening
Yep.
over and
It
over
just
again. I think that's
manifests
where we're
itself
at in
over and
part of the
over.
industry now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's we have our, and somewhat, if anybody even listens to this, our little plug on our dignitary protection course we have coming up in February. We
Right.
try to address a lot of those issues that that come up as far as influencing where you're getting your information from. We're fortunate enough that, with our background and in the protection world or dignitary protection and even EP, and then in the law enforcement community, fortunately, the class we have coming up are all law enforcement officers. So it does help us out, a little as far as, knowing who we're talking to and knowing the information they have available to them and knowing that to get to such a specialized training environment, if you're talking about law enforcement or tactical, because,
Right.
this is actually a tactical protection course, SWAT, SRT, or tactical officers that have they need the specialized training, and there's not a lot of that out there. So, their window to be able to
Very
select
narrow.
the
Yeah,
correct
yeah.
training is very narrow. Whereas, in you take the corporate security world, I mean, it's just a hodgepodge. Dating myself using that term. There's just a hodgepodge of things out there. We're trying to decipher what you need. What's bullshit and what's not. What's effective. You've really got to do your due diligence, and you got to look through a lens that's very critical and very skeptical of what you're looking at. And it's just a lot. And you just brought that thought up when you were talking about, doing due diligence. And I know you were talking about it from a client's perspective, of who
Yep.
you're actually bringing on board. But it just triggered that for me as far as
Well, if
the
you
training
remember,
environment too, because that's where it starts from.
well,
What.
if you remember, the some of the clientele we had at the beginning of the year asking us to help them vet teams.
Because they don't know. Yeah.
Some of the questions they ask us, that I think that gave us an insight into the misinformation, if you will, of what to actually look for, the legitimate concerns, right, and capabilities. And I think that's why you and I have talked about this in the past, but and I probably should have, prefaced some of that conversation with that brings that thought process into it, in the essence of, the client, they only know a certain amount, or the principal or whomever they have vetting that team. They're doing their own research, and just like anything else, garbage into a computer is garbage out of a computer,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes that happens, and we've seen that over time, especially trying to help companies out with their vetting process. So,
Yeah. Well, and not to come back full circle, but I will. But you talk about knowing how to ask the right questions. You know, just to point out the Charlie Kirk situation.
right, right.
With the interviews afterwards, someone knowing how to ask the right questions, we could have got to the bottom of it and realized where the failures were right from the get-go. Someone there asking the correct questions, you would have found out why this whole thing was so dysfunctional. You have found out
That,
that
yeah,
that
that's a
wasn't
good
a
point.
protection detail, right? That you guys were actually venue or site security. That's why your mindset was of as such that, hey, this is our responsibility, 30 meters, because protection teams don't talk
Right,
that way.
right.
You know what I
No,
mean? So if you have someone that knows how to ask the right questions, you can get down to the bottom, to the nitty gritty, wherever you need to be. And
but
and
there's a
that's just
lot of
why.
layers there that you just brought up, because I think that the previous people they worked for, I don't remember the guy's name. I think it was Schaefer or something.
Safer. Yeah.
Had the same mindset on some of his interviews. So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you see,
Site security.
so
That's all
there's
he
a
did.
trend. Yeah, there's a trend going on, that, and of course, whomever did the vetting for all those guys, once again, coming full circle, like you said, you didn't understand the values to ask
Right.
what is important, and what we're looking for, and recognizing what we're getting and what we thought we were getting.
Right. Which is the big thing. Correct.
Right.
Yep. And just as a PSA for anybody out there, you're talking about educating potential clients. If someone comes to you from a federal agency and it's a federal agency that does investigations,
Yeah.
um,
Keep them on
don't hire
investigating.
them for protection. Let's
Yeah,
just leave it at that. I don't care what agent, actually, it can be state agency, local law enforcement agency, federal agency. If the bulk of their experience is conducting investigations, and that's their bread and butter, investigations is not protection.
right. Yeah, I always go back to the analogy with asking the right questions, and it goes back to if anybody's listening to this that's old enough to remember the Yugo car,
Oh, of
right?
course.
The rear window defroster wasn't actually a defroster, right? It was designed for the guys pushing the car to keep their hands warm.
Yeah, there you go.
So know what
Yeah,
you're getting.
yeah, you go, girl. All right. All right. So, all right, let's switch gears, man. That went a little longer than what we thought. Got a little
All right.
sidetracked on that, but damn, it's so much fun to talk about.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
It's
painful, is
scary.
what it
It's
is.
scary fun to talk about. So protective intelligence. Again, laying the groundwork for why our concerns are as such. The threat landscape up into the last couple years before shit started to get real. Um, the threat landscape was anybody and everybody that was going to surface and cause problems was going to have some type of online profile. They were going to present themselves in threats or in grievance or whatever. They were going to identify themselves in an online platform. So you needed to go out there and get that inside early information, because then you can start building out during your investigation. All right, I'll throw that in
Right.
again. During your
There you go.
investigation, you can
Slid that
start
right
laying
in.
out a profile of who your potential threats are. And then you can actually start targeting them and getting more information. You can find out who they are, what their grievance is, why they're angry, if they are going to carry out an attack, how is it going to be conducted? And of course, we have some issues with that in today's landscape. If you want to go ahead and take the baton on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say that that very when people start targeting specific things like that with the unknown, I think they get very hyper focused on a certain aspect, right? Instead of
Oh yeah,
like we talk about, which is if you cover your bases, it doesn't really matter, right? If you actually do your job in a protection team, right, and cover all the avenues of approach, you take care of it, whether it's observation or shut it down, whatever it is,
yep,
right? You do your part, it doesn't really matter,
yep.
right? So, um, I think you had an article where you were just talking about this morning the uh, the false sense of um, thwarting a crime by incidental contact with
Oh
a
yeah, oh
closed
yeah. I got it saved
part.
right here. As a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that is a great article in the aspect of the false sense of accomplishment
Yep.
with
Yep.
the intelligence side of things when it was just happenstance. It wasn't a targeted interaction. If
Yeah.
it was
You assign.
targeted interaction because of the intelligence,
Yeah.
then you could probably
That's
bring them
different.
together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But a incidental contact for on a with a patrolman, it means absolutely zero,
Yeah, it
right?
doesn't
It
warrant
has no
merit.
value.
You can't assign merit, to that because of a
Yeah,
program or from some type of behavioral analysis assessments that led to this individual, this attack being thwarted. That's not the case. But I'll read
what's
that one, or I'll pick out some of the parts of that right here
okay.
that are
I was going
key.
to say we
And
also saw something else a couple days ago on LinkedIn. I think you sent it to me. A former FBI guy that worked for a large agency doing EP stuff that is part of threat assessment and basically brought a lot of value. What he said was brought a lot of value through his assessments over the years, which is most crimes against the principal don't use a firearm, right? So they spend too much time on firearms training,
oh
et
yeah,
cetera,
yeah,
et
yeah, I
cetera.
remember that now.
And my point is if you're doing threat assessment, I want to know more about the threat assessment side of things. If you've been doing it, I think he said 10 years or so. I want you to tell me how many criminal acts
Prevented.
you have interceded into against the client using your threat assessment. That's the value of the number I want, not the one that is in particular to a specific instrument. I want to know the actual task at hand. How many crimes did you stop against clientele?
That's it. That's a good point. Well, one of these things is, and I hate to say it this way, I don't want to reduce it to this, but I will say that I'll preface it with this. Yes, dumb people can be dangerous. All right. I'll be the first to admit that. And I say that because the people that promote themselves online, that they're about to commit a crime or they're thinking about committing a crime, they're not smart people.
Right.
I feel like Trump a little bit. I feel like Trump a little bit. They're not very smart. You know what I mean? They're not smart people. They're not professional.
I see dead people.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rick.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So they're not smart people. You know, do you take them seriously? I think that the past has shown that if these people are loud, they're the squeaky wheel. And they're promoting online. I hate this person. I like to kill them when I get. I like to take them out, or I have ill intent towards these people.
Yeah, I wish they weren't alive, or
yes,
whatever. Yeah.
Yes, or their term nowadays, don't unlike them. So yeah, if that's the case, then do you give these people the time of day? Sure, you give them the time of day. You log it in. In our experience, during real threat protection, those aren't the ones you have to worry about. Right. Not saying you shouldn't worry about them, but the ones you have to worry about, the ones that do not knock and announce. They're the ones that aren't advertising their intent. These are the ones that you got that unfortunately had the potential to slip under the radar, slip between the cracks when you, using your term, you become hyper focused on that squeaky wheel. When someone's out there saying, yeah, blah, 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 this is me, this is what I'm going to do. Man, I hate this person. Do you have a photo of that person? Yeah, this is our target. This is who we're looking for. And all of a sudden we become this. And again, I'll go back to, God, I hate to keep doing it. We're at a venue and I've got 12 dudes and I'm hyper focused on all of these people standing in front of me. Why? Because I've deemed online threats and people being squeaky wheels are our threat. And we're gonna dump all of our resources into this one compartmentalized little area. And it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. Yeah. So if you go off, and I know you're biting at the bit. So when you take that threat analysis and we've got 10 people, we've narrowed it down to where these people are the loudest. We've done backgrounds on them. And yes, they have the propensity to be able to commit violence. And if you think you're going to construct your security posture based on those 10 people, then you're making a mistake.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the issue. Go ahead.
Yeah, they close down that visual lens, that even the thought process, and they may not even do it, consciously. It might be subconscious that they're just working that angle, if you will, for lack of better terms. And don't even realize that they have narrowed their focus. That it's almost like someone saying, "We wouldn't have thought about that in a million years." Yeah, that tells you absolutely everything on that focus or intent, right, on how we're going to protect somebody.
Well, we saw it the other day, and we got 10 mics here left, but where it said, hey man, the intelligence part of protection is 90% of the job. 10% is just showing up and being a body out there. And that is our issue, because man, when you're talking about a real threat environment, that cannot be your baseline. It just can't be. You're going to fail miserably. Anyway. Yep. Yeah. You're going to fail miserably.
You're going to have problems. You're going to have problems with protecting your client with that thought process, that mentality.
When you start narrowing down, when you start trying to investigate your protection, investigate your way into providing physical protection, you're only going to get but so far. You're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to, you said earlier, all of those boxes that you have to check to provide protection, whether it's at the residence. It's en route, whether it's at the office, whether it's, restaurant at night, whatever it is. If you do not prepare accordingly for a threat and you're hyper focused on an individual and you don't see that individual wherever you're going, we can see the problems with that, right? So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead. We can go and just wrap this part up right here. You mentioned earlier about the incidental contact, which actually, surfaced this individual, the Pakistani that got arrested up there
okay.
in
Yeah,
Delaware, right? So this page, and I'm not going to call the person out, we'll do it, but it's the interesting things in here. When preparation meets prevention, all right. So it talks about this is an eye opener. Recent days, arrest of a man allegedly stockpiling weapons and drafting plans for mass casualty attack has made headlines nationwide. Let's see. These cases don't start with violence. They start with indicators, behaviors, and warning signs that trained professionals must recognize and act on. So we definitely want to talk about that one. Let's just take one little segment at a time, because that way I think it'll probably be the easiest way instead of coming back. So on this one, very, very bold to say that they don't start with violence. They start with indicators and behaviors. That's not necessarily true.
No, that's a little bit of misgiving, especially in this situation. So it to me, it goes back to the promotion of an idea, right? Hey, they've bought into the idea that this analysis, right, this threat landscape thing online is more than it is, right? And they're giving it credence and value by saying those. But that, we also know that, the same people that are bringing about some of these thoughts with the intelligence side of stuff, the online stuff, are the same people that are using the same person or concept that started the idea of that intelligence um, uh, uh, online back in the 90s, are the same ones that said everybody has a reason to do what they're doing. Do they always show it? No. Do we always recognize it if they do? No. So I think they're taking snapshots of a lot of the information that, I'm talking about the book Gift of Fear from
Yep.
Gavin de Becker. They're taking snapshots of that, of how he used some of the concepts of mosaic, and they're piecemealing it in order to fit into their narrative. That's what I believe.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no doubt. And again, that can only go but so far without a target. I mean, to take the full benefit of that target has to have emerged from somewhere to do that deep dive on it and to come up with all those potential answers. What, when, how, where, all of that stuff. If the target doesn't present itself, or if it doesn't emerge from incidental contact like it is here, you just by a field interview by a local police officer. If that doesn't emerge from there, then you're not going to have the necessary information to be able to get the full benefit of a system like that.
Right. So, looking at this story, and as you progress through the story, that field interview is what garnered the arrest, if you will, and the subsequent information. So if that field interview would have never happened, then their online intelligence would have never come about.
Non-existent.
It would have would have fallen apart. But it goes right back to what you said earlier about the squeaky wheel and whatever, it's that guy that when you're in that bar, and you have a little bit of a dust up, and that guy goes, "Man, you keep talking to me like that, I'm going to hit you." That's usually not the guy you got to worry about.
No,
it's the guy when you're actually in the middle of saying something and you get punched in the mouth.
There you go.
That's how it happens.
And the point of that one, where this was just by chance of a field interview by a law enforcement officer that broke this thing open. So when you say things like they don't start with violence, Well, actually, if you wouldn't have caught this guy during this, it very well could have started with violence,
Right.
right? And that's what,
Yeah.
and there would have been no patterns, there'd been no behaviors, none of
Yeah.
that stuff, right?
Yeah. No, that's why I said that statement in itself doesn't even, it doesn't even bear fruit.
Let's see. This incident also exposes a deeper challenge. Are we investing enough in behavioral threat assessment, information sharing, and frontline resources? Uh, Again, I mean, unless you have a target,
Right.
if you have to have a target for you to initiate a behavioral
Analyze.
analysis on
Yeah.
someone, right? So
Yeah.
this whole thing, like professional people or the real threats are going to present themselves and tell you who they are is a fallacy. And the previous threat landscape, we can get away with that. You can't do that if you have people that truly mean you harm here, because we've lived our last decades of life having to deal with those individuals,
Right.
right? And
Especially
that's
with what's surfaced here recently. Everybody's talking about the debacle in Afghanistan in 2021 and the vetting process or lack of vetting process. With some of these guys, they said were properly vetted, like the guy that just shot the two um, National Guardsmen. He was vetted. He was vetted. So how many of those guys in this country that
yep,
actually, when you're talking about targeting somebody, they're still moving about out there.
yeah.
They're
All
here,
right,
here
so
in the country.
yep. So we're probably going to go and wrap this thing up here. So the
All right.
last bullets we have, our checkpoints are threats don't emerge out of nowhere. Sometimes they do. Patterns always exist, not all the time.
Yeah.
And when agencies have tools, training, and support, disasters can be stopped before they start. That's a false sense of security.
Yeah. Well, the pattern could start with the actual attack, right?
Of
Because you're
course,
going
then you'll
to,
know. Then you'll have a
yeah,
target. You'll
yeah,
have a target
exactly.
on both ends. All right, man.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this thing up here and let's pick up on something else here in the next day or so.
All right, buddy. Thank
Good to
you.
go. All right, man. Thanks for your
All right.
time.
Out here. Bye.
All right, bye.